My name is Douglas Gilding, and I have spent almost 30 years in prison for what amounted to a 10-minute conversation in a car. In May of 1997, I was with my roommate, John Fisher, and we went to a local bar named Suzanne's Oyster Pub in the Orlando, Florida area. But he went into the back office of the bar and came out a few minutes later, used the payphone, and then said, "Hey, we got to go." So we got into his van. He was driving, I was the passenger. And we drove down the road to another bar called Post Time Lounge and went into their parking lot. A few minutes later, a guy that we both knew named Mike Stafford pulled in. He climbed into the back of the van with two other guys that I had never seen before, Thomas Chenault and Juan Smallwood. So John started telling him about the back office, and there was a safe in there with cocaine. He drew him a map of where the safe was, and then he started the van. Mike, Thomas, and Juan, they drove off, and then John and I went inside Post Time Lounge, stayed there for a little bit, and then we went home. Now, our apartment wasn't even in the same county as Suzanne's Oyster Pub. So early the next morning, around closing time, when Mike, Thomas, and Juan went and robbed Suzanne's, I was home in bed sleeping in literally a different county completely when the crime occurred.
There was a robbery, and unfortunately someone was killed in the process. Of the other co-defendants, only 2 received life in prison, other than Doug. Those 2 individuals were the ones that carried out the robbery and actually took the life of the individual inside of the bar. The other co-defendants all received various degrees of punishment, and all of them are out of prison at this time.
Someone can be sentenced to life in prison even if they did not kill someone, even if they were not at the scene of the crime, and even if they didn't know about it.
The person that did commit the crime is behind bars serving life without parole. So that's your public safety. He's off the streets. Somebody like Doug, who was in the vehicle and the conversation took place about robbing the bar, and then got out of that vehicle and went home and went to bed while the people in the vehicle went to the bar and committed the crime. That public safety doesn't even come up in that equation. He didn't hurt anybody. The person that did, or the people that did, are justly serving their correct sentences. Doug's not.
Here's what I would say about felony murder. They lead to lots of injustice. They lead to lesser accomplices doing more time than the primary planner of the crime. And there's something wrong with that.
Early in the case, I was offered a plea deal for accessory after the fact for 4.5 years. And the deal included me testifying on the other co-defendants. And the state was seeking the death penalty. And so I declined the deal. I told them I didn't want to be part of putting anybody on death row. And so I went to trial. I had a week-long trial, and the witnesses were John and Mike. The state had given them both deals to testify and say that it was me that told everybody where the safe was. Mike had changed so much of his original statement that my lawyers asked the prosecutor if they could get a second deposition so they could prepare some questions, because his second story was so different, none of their questions were pertinent anymore. It got so silly that the prosecutor, Charles Tabscott, he actually got up and stopped the deposition. And he told Mike, he said, "I'm going to go to court and withdraw your plea. You have changed your story so much, I can't use you as a witness."
Do we really mean to punish people who don't have that much culpability? Do we mean to punish them as harshly as the worst of the worst? Because life without the possibility of parole is a sentence of death in prison.
For him to be incarcerated for 28 years, and they want him for the rest of his life, and I say, no, you can't have him. And he is kind. He's going to be an asset to the community. He is an asset to the place that he lives. And I believe that when you meet him and meet the people around him, you will find out that so many of them think so much of him, you know.
He helps a lot of people. He really does.
But I do recall one year, it was my birthday, And Doug had went. Of course, you don't get birthday cakes and things like that in prison. But Doug went out, and I'll never forget this. He bought me a cheeseburger, and he made a makeshift candle.
He kept trying to encourage me to go get my GED, go get my GED. Finally, I said, all right, I'll go get it. I'll try. I probably wouldn't have it today. I know I wouldn't. I wouldn't have it today if it wasn't for him pushing me. Anything you wanted to learn, if he didn't know it, he'd learn it with you just to teach you.
He helped Greg out immensely.
So you made 2 hats. One said stupid and one said I'm with stupid. And so Greg, the only person that would agree to wear the hat was Doug.
He helped him right to the end.
Doug's drafted a couple of legislative bills that we've had to try to get felony murder rule amended.
The advocacy group We Heart Florida is pushing for change through the Ryan Holley Reform Act. Written by an inmate, the bill seeks to cap felony murder rule sentences at 15 years.
I'm in prison because I loaned my keys to my roommate.
I know that when I heard about his case, I was like, wow, his is actually the closest to mine that I've ever heard of. You know, I've heard other circumstances for other people, but Doug's was definitely, his is the closest to mine, easily. Even Rick Scott said, the governor Rick Scott, when he did the commutation of sentence for me, he even talked about how this law is not right anymore.
Attorneys in Florida know what felony murder is and how it is somewhat draconian and how it is applied to people whose involvement is very minimal in cases and crimes. Doug's is alarming, I would say. Doug is my most important client of every client that I have because of his situation and how strongly I feel that he deserves a second chance.
Get him out of prison. That's it, you know?
I have everything in this world that I could possibly ever want, except my son being home.